October 5th, 1931, 7:42 a.m., Upper West Side, Manhattan. Lucky Luciano turned the key in his black Cadillac's ignition. The explosion was so massive it shattered windows 6 blocks away. The car flipped 3 feet into the air, landed upside down in the middle of the street, and burst into flames. Black smoke poured into the October sky. The heat was so intense that people across the street could feel it on their faces. For 90 seconds, a crowd gathered, all thinking the same thing: nobody could survive that inferno. Then the impossible happened. The driver's door moved, being pushed from inside. A figure crawled through the flames. Lucky Luciano emerged from the wreckage, his entire body on fire, his hair gone, his face blackened, but he was moving. And what Lucky did next would defy every medical textbook ever written. He stood up, and he started walking 4 blocks, while his body burned, to save his own life. The doctors who treated him would later say it was medically impossible. The pain alone should have killed him. The shock should have stopped his heart. No human being walks 4 blocks with 40% of their body covered in second-degree burns. But Lucky Luciano wasn't just any human being. This is the story of the most impossible survival in criminal history, and the brutal revenge that followed 3 weeks later. To understand why someone tried to incinerate Lucky Luciano that October morning, you need to understand where he stood in 1931. At 34 years old, Lucky had already made more enemies than most men make in a lifetime. 5 months earlier, he'd helped orchestrate the murder of Joe Mafia, one of the most powerful mob bosses in New York. Shot him in a Coney Island restaurant while Mafia was eating spaghetti. Then, just 3 weeks before the car bomb, Lucky had arranged the assassination of Salvatore Maranzano, the self-proclaimed boss of all bosses, killed in his own office by men dressed as police officers. Lucky had eliminated the 2 most powerful Italian mobsters in America. In doing so, he'd made himself the most dangerous man in the underworld. But power comes with a price, and that price is a target on your back. There were old guard Sicilian mobsters who hated Lucky for killing their leaders. Irish gangs who resented Lucky's control of Manhattan. Rivals within his own organization who thought they could do better. By October 1931, at least a dozen different people wanted Lucky Luciano dead. The question wasn't if someone would try to kill him. The question was when and how. Lucky knew this. He wasn't naive. He varied his routes, changed his schedule, kept bodyguards close, checked his food for poison, watched for tails. But there was one thing Lucky did every single day, the same way at the same time. He got into his car, and someone had been watching, waiting for that pattern, that one predictable moment. That someone was an Irish explosives expert named Dynamite Dan Murphy. Dan Murphy was 52 years old, a former coal miner from Pennsylvania. He'd learned how to use dynamite in the mines, then started using that skill for less legal purposes, blowing open safes, demolishing buildings for insurance fraud, and occasionally killing people. Dan had worked for various Irish gangs over the years, but in October 1931, he was freelancing. Someone had paid him $5,000 to plant a bomb under Lucky Luciano's Cadillac. Dan was good at his job, very good. He'd killed 7 men with bombs over the previous decade. None of them had survived the initial blast. Lucky Luciano would be number 8. Except Dan made one mistake. Just one. He used too much dynamite. On the night of October 4th, at 2:00 a.m., Dan slid under Lucky's Cadillac with his tools. The street was empty. Lucky's car was parked in front of his apartment building, alone, unguarded. Dan worked quickly, professionally. He wired 6 sticks of dynamite to the ignition. When Lucky turned the key, The electrical current would trigger the blasting cap. The dynamite would explode, the car would be destroyed, and whoever was inside would be vaporized. Dan used 6 sticks because he wanted to be sure. 6 sticks was overkill for a car bomb. 3 would have been enough. But Dan didn't want Lucky walking away from this. He finished the job in 12 minutes, slid out from under the car, checked his work. Perfect. Dan walked away feeling confident. By tomorrow morning, Lucky Luciano would be dead, and Dan would be 5,000 richer. What Dan didn't know was that 6 sticks of dynamite was too much. Not too much to kill Lucky, too much to kill him cleanly. The explosion would be so powerful, so violent, that it would actually save Lucky's life. Because instead of incinerating everything inside the car instantly, the blast would flip the car, create chaos, give Lucky a split second to react. That split second would make all the difference. 7:30 a.m., Lucky Luciano had a routine. Every morning, same time, he'd walk out of his apartment building on the Upper West Side, get into his black Cadillac, drive to his office in Midtown. October 5th started like every other morning. Lucky walked out at exactly 7:30. His Cadillac was parked exactly where he'd left it the night before, right in front of the building. He opened the door, sat down, put the key in the ignition. The last thought that went through Lucky's mind before the explosion was, "I should have checked under the car." Then everything turned white, then red, then black. When Lucky opened his eyes, he was on fire, and he had a decision to make. Stay in the car and burn to death, or crawl through the flames and see what happens. Lucky chose the flames. The explosion had been so powerful, it lifted the Cadillac 3 feet off the ground and flipped it completely over. The car landed upside down in the middle of the street. Then it caught fire. Black smoke poured into the October sky. Flames shot 20 feet high. The heat was so intense that people across the street could feel it on their faces. A woman named Margaret O'Connor was hanging laundry in her backyard. She heard the explosion, dropped everything, ran to the front of her building. She stood there with a dozen other neighbors, all staring at the burning wreckage. The car was an inferno. The metal was melting. The rubber tires were burning with thick black smoke. For 90 seconds, everyone just stood there, frozen, waiting for fire trucks, knowing whoever was inside was dead. Then Margaret O'Connor saw something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The driver's side door moved, just slightly, being pushed from inside. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Someone's alive in there." The door kicked open hard. Violent flames poured out of the opening, and then a figure emerged. Lucky Luciano crawled through the fire. His entire body was burning. His hair was gone. His face was blackened. But he was moving. He crawled 3 feet, then collapsed onto the street, started rolling, trying to put out the flames on his body. People screamed. Someone ran toward him with a coat, threw it over Lucky to smother the fire. Lucky lay there for a moment, not moving, smoke rising from his body. Margaret O'Connor thought he was dead. Then Lucky's eyes opened. He looked around, assessed the situation, saw the crowd gathering, heard sirens in the distance. And Lucky Luciano did something that nobody expected. He stood up. His legs were shaking. His skin was smoking. He could barely breathe. But he stood up. A man ran over to help him. "Don't move. Ambulance is coming." Lucky pushed him away. "I'm fine," Lucky said. His voice was hoarse, damaged from smoke inhalation. "You need a hospital?" "I know," Lucky said. And then he started walking. Margaret O'Connor watched Lucky Luciano walk down the street away from the burning car, away from the crowd, away from the approaching sirens. He walked like a man who just had a bad day at the office. Not like a man who just crawled out of an exploding car while on fire. 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks. People stopped on the sidewalk, stared, pointed. A man covered in burns, suit destroyed, walking calmly down a Manhattan street. Someone asked if he needed help. Lucky waved them off. 4 blocks later, Lucky Luciano walked through the front doors of Bellevue Hospital. He approached the intake desk. The nurse looked up. Her face went pale. "I need a doctor," Lucky said. Then he collapsed. The doctor's name was Robert Chen. He'd been working at Bellevue for 12 years. He'd seen everything. Factory accidents, tenement fires, gang shootings. But he'd never seen anyone walk into the emergency room with injuries like this. Second-degree burns covering 40% of Lucky's body. Face blackened from smoke. Suit melted into his skin. Possible internal injuries from the blast. Dr. Chen worked on Lucky for 6 hours. Removing burned clothing. Treating the burns. Checking for internal bleeding. Giving him morphine for the pain. When Lucky finally regained full consciousness, Chen asked him the obvious question. "What happened to you?" Lucky looked at him. His eyes were completely calm. "My car exploded." "You should be dead." Lucky smiled. It hurt to smile, but he did it anyway. "People keep telling me that." Dr. Chen would learn later that the man on his table was Lucky Luciano, the most powerful mobster in New York. And Chen understood something in that moment. This man didn't survive by luck. He survived by will. "How did you get here?" Chen asked. "I walked." Dr. Chen stared at him. "You walked? With these injuries? 4 blocks. That's impossible. The pain alone should have incapacitated you. Most people would have died from shock." Lucky met his eyes. "I had things to do. More important than your life. More important than dying in the street while my enemies watched." Dr. Chen had never heard anything like it. In 12 years of emergency medicine, he'd never met someone who could walk 4 blocks with 40% burns. The medical textbook said it couldn't be done, but Lucky Luciano had done it. "What you did?" Chen said quietly. "It shouldn't be medically possible." "Doctor," Lucky replied. "Let me tell you something. The human body can do impossible things when the mind decides it has to." Lucky spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Not in a regular room, in a private suite on the top floor, guarded 24 hours a day by his men. The first week, Lucky barely moved. The pain was constant. Every breath hurt. Every movement felt like fire on his skin. But Lucky didn't complain. Didn't cry out. Just lay there thinking. The second week, Lucky started asking questions. Who planted the bomb? Who paid for it? Who knew his routine well enough to time it perfectly? Meyer Lansky visited every day, brought updates, names, theories. "It was professional," Meyer said. "Not some amateur job. Whoever did this new explosives." "Irish?" Lucky asked. "Probably. The Irish gangs have been making noise. They're angry about Maranzano. Think we're taking over too much territory." "Find out who," Lucky said. "I want a name." The third week, Meyer came back with information. Daniel Murphy. Goes by Dynamite Dan, explosives expert. Works freelance. He's done 7 hits with car bombs. All successful. "Not this one," Lucky said. "No," Meyer agreed. "Not this one." "Where is he?" "Brooklyn. He's been laying low." "Thinks you're dead." Lucky's eyes went cold. Let him keep thinking that for a few more days. On October 26th, 3 weeks after the explosion, Lucky Luciano checked himself out of Bellevue Hospital against doctor's orders. Dr. Chen tried to stop him. "You need at least 2 more weeks of treatment. The burns aren't fully healed. You're at risk of infection." "I have something I need to do," Lucky said. "More important than your health." Lucky looked at him. "Much more important." Lucky left the hospital that afternoon. His face was still scarred. His hands were wrapped in bandages. He moved slowly, carefully, but he was moving. And he had a destination in mind. Dan Murphy was celebrating. October 30th, almost 4 weeks since the car bomb, and nobody had come for him. No cops, no Lucky's men, nothing. Dan figured Lucky's organization was in chaos, fighting over who'd take control. They had bigger problems than finding one Irish bomb maker. Dan was wrong. That night, Dan was having drinks at a bar in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Small place, quiet. Dan liked it because nobody asked questions. He was on his third whiskey when 2 men walked in. They didn't look at Dan, didn't acknowledge him. Just sat at the bar, ordered drinks. Dan didn't think anything of it. 15 minutes later, Dan decided to leave. Paid his tab, walked out into the October night. He made it half a block before he felt a gun pressed against his spine. "Keep walking," a voice said. Dan's blood went cold. "Where?" "The warehouse." End of the block. Dan walked. The gun stayed pressed against his back. A second man appeared on his left, boxing him in. They reached the warehouse, old, abandoned. The door was already open. They pushed Dan inside. The warehouse was dark, empty, except for one thing, a chair in the middle of the floor under a single hanging light bulb. And sitting in that chair, smoking a cigarette, was Lucky Luciano. Dan stopped walking. His legs went weak. "You're dead," Dan whispered. "So I've heard," Lucky said. Lucky stood up slowly. His movements were still stiff from the burns, but he stood. "You're good at your job, Dan." 7 successful hits. 7 men dead. All car bombs. Clean work. Dan didn't say anything. "But you made a mistake with me." "Want to know what it was?" Dan shook his head. "You used too much dynamite. 6 sticks. That's overkill. 3 would have been enough. But you wanted to be sure. Wanted to make sure I was vaporized." Lucky walked closer. "The problem is, 6 sticks was so much explosive power that it actually saved my life. The blast was so violent it flipped the car before it could incinerate me. Gave me a split second to react, to cover my face, to position my body." Lucky was standing right in front of Dan now. "If you'd used 3 sticks, I'd be dead, but you got greedy. You wanted to make it spectacular." Lucky nodded to his men. They grabbed Dan, forced him into the chair, tied his hands behind his back, tied his feet to the chair legs. Dan was hyperventilating now. "What are you going to do?" Lucky walked to the corner of the warehouse. Picked up something, walked back. 6 sticks of dynamite. Wired together. Dan's eyes went wide. No. No. You know what's interesting about dynamite, Dan? It's unpredictable. Sometimes it kills you instantly. Sometimes it just blows you apart piece by piece. Lucky's men positioned the dynamite behind the chair, wired it carefully. "This is 6 sticks. Same amount you used on me. Let's see if it works better this time." "Lucky! Lucky, please!" Lucky didn't move. "Did you use 6 sticks because someone paid you extra, or because you just wanted to be sure?" Dan was crying now. I'm sorry. It was just a job. They paid me $500. I didn't know." "Who paid you?" "I don't know. I swear. Irish guy, never gave me a name." "Just money and a target?" Lucky believed Dan. He was too terrified to lie. "Okay," Lucky said. He pulled out a lighter, lit the fuse. Lucky, please!" Lucky and his men walked toward the door. The fuse was burning. 30 seconds, maybe. Dan screamed, pulled against the ropes. The chair tipped over. Dan was on the floor now, still tied, still helpless. 20 seconds. Lucky stopped at the door, turned around. "You used 6 sticks because you wanted to be remembered. You wanted people to talk about the bomb that killed Lucky Luciano. 10 seconds. Well, congratulations, Dan. People will remember you as the man who tried to kill me with a car bomb and failed. 5 seconds. Lucky walked out, closed the door. The explosion shook the entire warehouse district. They found Dan Murphy's body the next morning, or rather, pieces of it. The police ruled it an accident. Explosives expert killed by his own materials. Happens sometimes. Tragic. Pinned to the warehouse wall, untouched by the blast, was a note. Your work was sloppy. Mine isn't. LL. The police removed the note before reporters arrived. Word spread through the underworld fast. Lucky Luciano had survived a car bomb, crawled out of the flames, walked to the hospital, recovered in 3 weeks, then hunted down the bomber and killed him with his own methods. The story became legend. People started calling Lucky Unkillable, charmed, protected by something more than luck. Lucky never encouraged these stories, but he never denied them either, because there was power in being seen as indestructible. A month after the bombing, Lucky was back to his normal routine. Same apartment, same Cadillac, same schedule. Except now he checked under his car every morning, and nobody tried to bomb him again. The scars from the explosion never fully healed. Lucky's hands remained slightly discolored. His face had marks that makeup couldn't quite cover. When he smiled, you could see where the burns had damaged his skin. But Lucky wore those scars like armor. They were proof. Proof that he'd survived something that should have killed him. Proof that he was tougher than his enemies. Proof that you couldn't kill Lucky Luciano with violence alone. You needed to be smarter than him, and nobody was. Years later, when Lucky was in prison, Dr. Chen visited him. The doctor was older now, retired, but he'd never forgotten the man who walked 4 blocks with 40% of his body burned. I've been practicing medicine for 35 years, Dr. Chen said, and I've never seen anyone survive what you survived. Lucky shrugged. I had things to do. Most men would have died from shock alone. The pain should have incapacitated you. You shouldn't have been able to move. I needed to move, Lucky said. If I stayed there, if I let them take me in an ambulance, if I went to a hospital near the scene, my enemies would know exactly where I was. They'd finish the job. So you walked. So I walked. Dr. Chen shook his head in amazement. You're the toughest patient I've ever had. Lucky smiled. That same calm smile. Doctor, let me tell you something. Toughness isn't about not feeling pain. It's about feeling the pain and deciding it doesn't matter. It's about being on fire and choosing to crawl through the flames instead of staying in the car. That's not toughness. Drudder, Chen said. That's survival instinct. Maybe, Lucky agreed. Or maybe survival is just another word for refusing to give your enemies what they want. That conversation stayed with Dr. Chen. He told it to his students for years, used Lucky as an example of the human body's ability to endure. But what do Dr. Chen never fully understood was this: Lucky Luciano didn't survive that car bomb because of his body. He survived because of his mind. Because when that explosion happened, when everything turned white and red and black, when Lucky opened his eyes and found himself on fire, he didn't panic. He calculated. He thought, if I stay here, I die. If I move, I might die. But moving gives me a chance. And Lucky always took the chance that gave him control. That's what made him lucky. Not fortune. Not fate. Choice. The choice to crawl through fire instead of accepting death. The choice to walk 4 blocks in agony instead of waiting for help that might not come. The choice to spend 3 weeks recovering and then spend 1 night getting revenge. Daniel Murphy made one mistake with that car bomb. He assumed 6 sticks of dynamite was enough. He assumed Lucky Luciano was just another man. He was wrong on both counts. If this story of survival, willpower, and brutal revenge moved you, hit that subscribe button. We're telling the lucky Luciano stories that show how intelligence and toughness beat impossible odds. Drop a like if you think crawling out of an exploding car while on fire is the ultimate survival moment. And in the comments, what would you have done in Lucky's position? Stay and wait for help, or walk 4 blocks while burning? Turn on notifications, because next time we're telling the story of how Lucky Luciano convinced the FBI's star witness to recant his testimony, and why the agent who built the case against Lucky ended up working for him instead. Remember, toughness isn't about not feeling pain. It's about feeling the pain and deciding it doesn't matter. And Lucky Luciano proved that when he chose to crawl through the flames rather than accept defeat. October 5th, 1931. The day a car bomb created a legend. The day Lucky Luciano walked 4 blocks while on fire. The day the medical world learned that human limits aren't about the body. They're about the mind. And sometimes, when the mind is strong enough, the impossible becomes inevitable.